Oh, very cool. Where at?
I'm in Gaithersburg.
Gaithersburg. Okay. I was just in Annapolis a
Oh,
couple of
nice.
months ago.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Annapolis is beautiful.
Very beautiful. One of my best friends moved there. I'm in Chicago, so
Oh,
he moved
okay,
from
cool.
Chicago a couple of years back. And yeah.
Nice. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago as well, Buffalo
Oh, you
Grove.
did?
It's like northwest.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Cool.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, dude, what an amazing book. I wish I had more time to read your other books, but I feel like I can talk about this for like 5 hours at least.
Awesome. This will be
Also,
fun.
am I a little loud on my mic or is it fine?
No, it's good.
Okay, just want to make sure because I see it going. Okay, sounds good. Um, yeah, I would say okay. So one thing, Alan, that I really wanted to ask you was why did you dedicate your book to your kids?
I've dedicated all three books to my kids. I guess I'm hoping that on some level the books are part of my legacy whenever I'm gone and forgotten. And I think the most important part of my legacy is my kids. And have I raised, three, secure, confident, aware contributors to this world. So yeah, I'll dedicate all future books to them as well.
Yeah, I'd even say like, I see the sign behind you says success simplified. I think it's so powerful, not only your books, but to have you as like a figure in their lives because, you know, just like you said in the book, people overcomplicate success a lot. So it's nice to have you as like that barrier between translation as like this doesn't have to be as complicated as you think.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I think almost every area of our life, we tend to overcomplicate things, and really, it's the complication and the complexity and the sexiness that people try and sell. You don't really make much money selling the basics, selling the fundamentals. So I think in a capitalistic consumer based society, that's really where it stems from. Everyone's trying to make everything seem way more complicated than it needs to be, and really the basis of getting in good physical health, the basis of relationships, the basis of business. I mean, all of these things are unbelievably simple. Doesn't mean they're easy by any means. I'm never implying these things are easy to achieve, but the building blocks to being excellent in any of those areas is very, very simple.
Yeah. So you talked about basics and fundamentals. And I remember in your book, you said, I think it was 2007, Kobe told you that he never gets bored doing the basics. One thing that I really wanted to ask you, because your book is divided into 7 parts, also for my listeners that are listening to this, your book is divided into 7 parts. It goes self awareness, mindset, vision, fundamentals, then taking action, resilience, and then lastly, relationships and communication. A lot of people think about the basics and fundamentals as the base layer, right? The first thing that you need in order to build off of it. But you had 3 parts before it. You had self awareness, mindset, and vision that come before the fundamentals. How come it's laid out like this?
Um, I mean, really, self-awareness is always going to be the foundation. I mean, that's going to be the starting point. In the same way that if you're ever using a GPS, your GPS needs to know exactly where you are in the moment, and it
Right.
needs to know where you're trying to go. But that first point of entry is always going to be most important. So yeah, self-awareness is always where it starts. And really, I mean, the basics and the fundamentals on some level apply to all of the different sections. I mean, I every area of my life I'm trying to simplify and untether from the unnecessarily complex. So it's really the fundamentals component has very high utility and can be applied just about any area of life.
Yeah. When you talk about the fact that you're always trying to simplify, your own life pursuits, what was the hardest time that you had to take something that seemed very complex in your brain and simplify it?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can think of a specific time. I just know as a general characteristic, it's kind of the mindset, especially in the personal development space, which is a space I've always really been attracted to and enjoyed. I mean, I've been reading personal development books for most of my adult life, and have always been attracted to kind of that self help space. And one of the, I guess, kind of unwritten concepts in that is always this concept of trying to add more tools to your toolbox, and add more tools to your toolbox. That phrase has even become somewhat cliche. And while I can appreciate the sentiment behind staying open minded and curious to wanting to learn new stuff, and I hope that I possess those traits, for the rest of my life, I also realize that, you know, just adding tools to your toolbox isn't always the answer. It's learning how to actually use the tools you have, and really trying to master the ones that you have that becomes more important. If not, you're just lugging around a heavier toolbox, if we're going to use the same analogy. I mean, there's no sense in adding tools that either you don't know how to use or you don't plan on using. So for me, instead of trying to continuously add tools to my toolbox, I'm trying to let go of the ones that I no longer use, or the ones that no
Mm,
longer serve me, or the ones that I don't actually need. So to me, that's where simplifying success comes in. It's like, take a handful of basic fundamental concepts, work towards mastery of those, primarily during the unseen hours, and you can get pretty good at just about anything, if you're willing to kind of weave through the clutter and focus on those fundamentals.
yeah. Alan, this is going to be a very poorly phrased question because my mind's all over the place. I love what you said, but so one of the things I'm thinking about is people oftentimes know what they might need to do to get to where they want to go, right? Like simplifying the measures of success. But for example, you're talking about adding things in your toolkit as opposed to sticking to your fundamentals and improving upon it, especially during the unseen hours. So for me, I think about something like AI, right? I think it's vital that people add AI into their toolbox in order to learn where they can maybe leverage their time or leverage their tools. But there's so many other things in between that might or might not be worth it. So how do you know when you want to stick to what you already have and improve upon it, as opposed to maybe picking up something like AI and knowing that it's going to save you a lot of time?
I actually think you can balance both, right? I think we should strive to balance both. And in fact,
Mm,
in my own life, that's the balancing act that I'm constantly working. On one hand, I do want to continue to focus on the basics and the fundamentals and work towards refining those and mastery of those, every single day. And these can be massive skill sets. These can be mindsets. These can be approaches. These can be like something like communication. The ability to actively listen and articulate your own point of view. I mean,
mm,
that's a skill set that will serve you in every area of your life for the rest of your life. I mean, there's not an area of life that won't be significantly enhanced if you get really good at communication. So that's, to me, that would be one of the basic building blocks that I think all human beings should be working on. But I'm not saying that we should only work on the basics. I'm saying we should never leave them or abandon them entirely. I believe that in addition to working on the basics, we should stay open minded and curious and courageous enough to lean into new perspectives and philosophy,
mm,
to lean into
yeah.
new technologies. I absolutely highly encourage folks to be open-minded and curious enough to lean into AI and to try and learn as much about it as you can and figure out ways that it can actually simplify your own life, make your own life more efficient and effective. But I think we can do both. I think we can strive to work towards mastery of the basics while still staying open-minded enough to try new technologies and try new things. And that's what I try and do in my own life is balance those two worlds. And when I, find something like AI and I realize there are certain ways that I can utilize AI to actually amplify and emphasize what it is that I'm doing from a basics or fundamental standpoint, then to me that's the key right there.
I love that you talk about it helping you in your basics as opposed to I feel like a lot of people are like, what is the top of the top of the top thing that I want AI to help me? So I thought that was very cool. You mentioned that listening is one of those basic building blocks that we all have. What are a couple of other building blocks you can think of that all the listeners, all the people possess, but they might not be using enough?
Well, real quick before I answer that, here's what I think a lot of people fall short with AI. And trust me, I'm still very much a novice when it comes to all things AI, but I think a lot has to do with the intent behind it. And if you use AI as a tool to help you amplify and improve some of these other areas of your life, then I think that's well worth the investment of time and resources. If you're looking at it as simply a shortcut to replace, where you can say, hey,
Mm,
I don't have to do any work now because AI can do all of the work for me. To me, that could be a potential pitfall. So for me, as a speaker and an author and someone that creates social content, I use AI as a way to help me do those things more efficiently, as a way to be more effective in that. But I don't want AI to replace all of that and just do it for me. Because one of the reasons that I speak and that I write books and that I create social content is because that's how I'm learning. That's how I'm growing. It's the person I'm becoming by doing those things. And if I just get AI, for instance, if I decide to write a fourth book, if I just outsource everything to AI and tell AI to write the entire book for me, sure, I'll have another book, but I won't have grown in the process. And to me, what's most important is who is the man that I'll become through the process of writing another book. That's what's most important. So it's kind of like, and I had said this quote in my original book, Raise Your Game, but it's this concept that you can't pay someone to do your push-ups.
Mm,
Obviously, if you want your body to get physically stronger and get in good shape, you have to do the work. You have to eat the clean diet. You have to move your body or lift weights or do whatever it is you're going to do. You can't outsource that. And we all know that from a physical standpoint. But, it's getting to the point where AI can outsource a lot of the intellectual stuff that we do, a lot of the mental and that's where I think we just have to be careful. So I'm trying to use those tools to help enhance my ability to speak and to write and to put good content out there. But I don't want to just switch on autopilot, because then I will atrophy as a person. My cognition and my intellect will atrophy if I'm not constantly thinking and stimulating and trying and doing different things. So I think we need to be careful in how we use AI, but mostly from an intent standpoint.
and also to add on to that, I think, well, I absolutely love this perspective, Alan. I wish more people thought like this. I also think that at the end of the day, you know whether or not you used AI to write your book, right? So it really doesn't matter. Like, okay, you can get a fourth book out there and people could be saying, Alan, this is a game changer. I love this book. All of the praise is good, but you know within yourself that you didn't do it. So what does the praise really get you, right? When you put in the work. So I actually wrote a book last year in November. It's like a small book on communication. And
Awesome.
I had somebody who came up to me and he was like, "Oh, like I know you used AI to write everything." And I was like, "No, I didn't." And I realized I was like, the price that I pay for other people thinking that I wrote AI as opposed to me knowing I didn't is good for myself. Like it really doesn't matter what other people think. You know what I mean? So I just thought that was an interesting point.
That is. Well, congrats on your book. And yeah,
I appreciate
again, and I don't know that we always have the balance perfect, but I think it's worth the exploration. So on one hand, I highly encourage folks to lean into AI and to get familiar with how you can use it to either amplify or make your life more efficient, but don't get to the point where you're so reliant on it. It's because you just brought up a great point. The self-satisfaction that we get from actually doing the work is what's most important. I mean, I guess on some level, and I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole. I mean, it's also similar to some of these GLP drugs and weight loss drugs that, again, I have absolutely no judgment on what someone chooses to do that they believe is in their best interest or what's best for their health. But I would imagine if your goal was to lose 30 pounds and you lost it the old fashioned way by eating less
it.
and moving more, you probably would feel a greater sense of accomplishment than if you just took a drug and lost 30 pounds. I mean, the net loss of 30 pounds would be the same either way. But to your point, I actually think you would increase your confidence, your self-belief, and the sense of accomplishment having done it the old-fashioned way. But once again, there are plenty of scenarios where my guess is that a GLP drug would actually enhance your ability to lose weight if you also ate a better diet and you did move your body. So you could almost look at it very similar to AI, or I would use it similar to AI, is use it as a supplement to what you're doing. Don't use it just in its entirety and let that be the only thing. Because if we get to the point where all we do is take drugs to look a certain way and all we use is AI to produce stuff, then we're not really enjoying the human experience. We're not living life. We're actually not contributing. We're just kind of a bystander to these different shortcuts. And some of it might just be my age. I mean, I'm 50 years old and I don't look for shortcuts. I don't look for hacks. I look for things to make what I do more efficient. I look for things that will make me more effective, but I don't look for something to replace the human experience. And, I have 3 teenage children and they may have a very different perspective because this is the only world that they know. I mean, they've grown up, only knowing the internet and social media and now AI. And my kids are actually more savvy with using AI than I am. So part of that learning curve is awesome for being younger. But I grew up before internet, before smartphones, before a lot of this stuff. So I've been able to experience life on both ends. And to me, there's nothing more important than the human experience, considering that our lives are relatively short. I mean, at best, we're around for 80, 90, 100 years. When you look at the entire existence of the planet and the species, that's not very long. So to me, I want to get as much out of life as possible, which is why I don't want to outsource these things.
Yeah, and I also think that, well, even one of the principles I feel like in your book is the person you become in the process of doing all of these things. So kind of like you were talking about, I think Andy Frisell talks about this a lot as well. You could use the GLP-1s, right? Again, absolutely no judgment from me too. Like do
Sure.
whatever. But I think if you were to do it the old-fashioned way, right? You work out, you eat less, you become a different person in the process. And in a way, you might even change your habits. And when you change your habits, you might have an easier time moderating the person that you became, as opposed to, I can see a world where if you use, I don't know, GLP-1s, right?
Sure.
You lost a lot of weight a lot quicker, but doing less hard work.
Yes.
I can imagine that you might revert to your old habits because you didn't change your identity in the process of trying to be this person that lost the weight. What do you think about that?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'll even use a real world example with myself. So, physical fitness is something that's always been important to me. I have and still do identify as an athlete. And to me, the beauty is in putting in the work. It's actually sweating. It's actually feeling your muscles burn. It's going to the gym. It's doing these workouts. That's what's making me the man that I am. But I also realize, if there are things you can do to supplement that, then it's worth exploring. But I don't think it's worth doing if you're looking at it to replace it. So a
Sure.
perfect example for me at 50 years old, one of the other major rages right now in health and fitness are peptides. And this, again, very similar to AI. I have a very, very, very novice understanding of peptides, of what they do, of which ones to take, how to use it. And at present, I have never taken any peptides. But I'm open to exploring whether or not that can be safely integrated in to my daily, weekly, and monthly routine. But here's the thing. I can already check off the following boxes. I prioritize my sleep. I prioritize my rest and recovery. I strength train consistently several days a week. I do cardiovascular exercise, either brisk walks or playing basketball several times a week. I do sauna and cold plunges. I eat a very, very clean diet 95% of the time. And the 5% that I don't, it's very intentional. It's not because I lack discipline. It's because I choose to go eat a burger and fries with my children. But so I'm checking off all of the boxes of what I need to be doing to be physically fit. And if I can check all of those boxes off, and then I say, I through research and under the care of a physician, learn that taking certain peptides can get me just a little bit better, can get me a 1 or 2% gain on top of doing all of the manual labor myself, then it would be something that I'd be open to exploring. Because like I said, I don't have any judgment on any of this stuff. I don't think a peptide is good or bad. I don't think a GLP-1 is good or bad. I don't think AI is good or bad. I just look at all of these neutral and sterile as tools. It just depends on how you use them, on whether or not I guess you could qualify them as good or bad. So if someone says, hey, I don't feel like eating a clean diet and I don't feel like going to the gym and I don't really prioritize my sleep, but I want to take peptides so that I can be in great shape. To
Mm.
me, that is robbing you of the human experience. Again, no judgment. Do whatever you want to do. It doesn't hurt me, but I would never make that decision. But on the other hand, if I can check off the boxes of doing everything within my control to get in the best shape possible, and through research and under a physician's care, realize that peptides can get me just a little bit further that I can't get to doing all of that stuff, then it'd be something I'm open to. But as you're seeing, because this has been the red thread of every answer I've had, to me, I won't do anything that robs me of the human experience, of what it actually means to be alive. And that goes back to the question that you asked, which was a great question, which I know I put us on this tangent. In addition to like active listening, to me, the most important skill sets that we can develop as human beings are emotional intelligence, emotional regulation. It's me. I mean, I would argue that outside of self-awareness, there's nothing more important than the ability to acknowledge, know, manage, and understand your own emotions, and to be able to perform and communicate and be in relationships at a high level, regardless of how you feel. Because as human beings, part of that human condition is our emotions are going to constantly ebb and flow. You know, no emotion is permanent. Yes, there are some people that tend to be more, happier than others, but generally speaking, no emotion is permanent. They're fleeting by design and they ebb and flow. So to me, the ability to know and acknowledge and recognize and manage our emotions in a variety of different situations might be the most important fundamental characteristic that any of us can develop. And it's certainly one that I'm constantly working on myself, and one that I try and model and teach to my own children.
Yeah, one of the things I had written down as a quote from your book is you said emotions are information, not directives.
Yes, 100%. They're designed to inform us, not designed to direct what we do. So here's the very important distinction. And again, I'll just speak in the first person. I don't ignore or suppress or resist my own emotions. I give myself permission and freedom to feel however I feel. And I will acknowledge, and part of this that I mentioned before, that I look at a tool like AI through a neutral lens. I don't look at it as good or bad. It is sterile. It's unbiased. AI is just AI. Now, you can use AI for good. You can use AI for evil. You can
Right.
use AI to enhance your life. You can use AI to undermine your life. Well, it's the same thing with emotions. I choose not to label emotions as good or bad because I don't believe that any emotion is good or bad. I think we need all of them. Now, I will readily acknowledge that for most of us as human beings, we have emotions that we would prefer to feel, and there are certainly some emotions that are unpleasant. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I like feeling angry or irritated or jealous or any of those, but they're not bad emotions. They're just they're signals, they're feedback, they're guideposts. When I'm feeling angry or irritated or jealous, that emotion is signifying that something in my environment is throwing up a red flag and making me feel this way. And it's an invitation and an opportunity for me to dig deeper and try to figure out why I'm feeling that way. So it's a good thing to feel those. Now, the big difference is, and this is what emotional regulation is, I give myself permission to feel all of my emotions, but I don't give myself permission to behave however I want. And I don't give myself that just because I'm feeling angry does not give me the right to behave in an angry manner. Or just because I'm feeling irritated does not give me the right to be disrespectful to you or to be rude to you or rude to a waiter at a restaurant. So I'm allowed to be upset, but I'm not allowed to disparage people or be disrespectful. So that's where I draw the line. I'm going to feel how I feel. I'm going to acknowledge how I feel. I'm going to dig deeper and try and figure out why I'm feeling that way, but I'm not going to allow that anger or that irritation or that jealousy to how I show up in the world and to how I treat people and to the decisions I make. I mean, I think everyone watching or listening to this right now could appreciate that if you make really important decisions from a place of anger or from a place of jealousy or from a place of irritation, you're probably not making the best decision that you can. And you're probably not making a decision that your future self will be grateful for. So feel how you want to feel, but don't let the emotions drive the car.
Yeah, one of my really good friends, he wants to be in the performance psychology space, and he told me something very similar to what you're talking about. He said, when you have your certain emotions or your certain thoughts, imagine there's a river and it's like leaves are flowing by. You can observe it, but you don't have to necessarily pick it up. So I thought that was something interesting you said.
That's beautiful. Yes. And that's the thing so the terminology I use, and I know that's in the book, is just learn how to become a bystander to your emotions, is
Yeah.
is almost like an out of body experience. The way I look at it is I try and step outside of myself and view me as if I was watching a movie. And Alan Stein
Yeah.
Jr. is just a character in a movie. And this character in the movie right now is really angry at something. And I'm just watching. Again, there's no judgment. He's a human being. He's allowed to feel angry. That is part of the human condition. But let's see what he chooses to do with that behavior. And going back to being the one that is in charge, I'm not going to let that drive the car. I'm not going to let those particularly unpleasant emotions change my decision making or change how I treat people or change how I show up. And to me, that's also what being a professional is. And that's what being really good in any area of life. I want to be able to consistently show up for my children, even if I'm in a bad mood or even if
Right.
I'm feeling discouraged or whatever. And same thing, from a professional standpoint. I mean, you and I scheduled to have this recording and have this conversation today. However I was feeling prior to this is completely irrelevant to how my duty to show up and be fully present and be fully engaged and do the best I can to answer your questions, have a great conversation, and add value to your listeners. So, in a perfect world, you have no idea how I'm feeling internally unless I choose to share it, because I'm not going to let how I feel dictate how I show up. Because, I mean, how could you ever have any form of consistency or be a professional in any area of life if the way you behave and show up depends on how you feel? So, yeah, there was an old Nick Saban saying that said standard over feelings. And I really hold that, to be a truth in my own life. Is I try to show up, behave, and perform to a standard, not based on how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I even know that you put in your book that you'll like return the shopping carts on purpose for the same reason. And I actually do the same exact thing, so I totally understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another kind of mantra that I try and live by is, leave every place better than you found it. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. I mean, from a literal standpoint, I go for a walk every single morning when I'm home and I'm not traveling, just an outdoor walk. It's a great way for me just to kind of start my day, get outside into some sun. I usually listen to a podcast while I'm walking. And if I'm walking and I see a piece of trash on the ground and I see a trash can within, a few feet, then I just pick it up and I throw the trash away. And I'm not saying that because I want any type of award and anyone to leave a comment like I'm some good humanitarian. It's just a belief system I have. Leave every place better than you found it. So literally, I try and leave places better than I find them. But it's also kind of a figurative approach. I want to leave every interaction with a human being better than I found them, which means if I see you in an elevator, even for 20 seconds, I'm going to smile and say good morning. And then when I leave the elevator, I'll say, hope you have a great day. And I'm hoping that just that brief interaction just left you just in a slightly better place mentally and emotionally than before I got in that elevator. So to me,
I love
that's
that.
one of the mantras I live by. And another mantra I live by, not that you asked, but I'm going on this roll, is that and it's very similar to the one I just shared, and that is a compliment unshared is an act of selfishness. That if you
Mm,
have something nice to say to another human being and you choose not to say it, that's being selfish. Like there's a chance for you to leave that person better than you found them by saying something nice to them. So I try and be as open and as liberal as possible with sharing as many nice things as I can. Um, and I hope that it resonates. And I hope that every single day I've left the world just a little bit better than I found it. And I know for a fact that I'm not batting 1,000. I don't have straight A's. I'm not doing this all of the time. Trust me, I'm a human being, so I am fallible and flawed. And there have been plenty of times where I'm sure I could have said something nice to someone, but maybe I was in a little bit of a mood and I didn't. So none of this is about perfection, but nevertheless, that is the standard that I do my very best to hold myself to as consistently as possible.
yeah, the idea that you just shared of, saying something nice to somebody in the elevator, I remember you talked about in your book and you called it emotional deposits. Could you talk about that? Because I wanted a little bit more information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, anytime you can make an emotional deposit in someone else, and that could be something as simple as a quick fist bump or a high five. It could be saying something, again, a quick compliment. But yeah, I believe there are emotional deposits and withdrawals, no different than a bank account. And I want to
I
make
love
as
that.
many emotional deposits into other people as possible. Because at some point, there will be a withdrawal. There'll be some point where you need something from someone, or you're going to drain some of their emotional currency because they need to help you. So I believe, just generally speaking, I want to make as many deposits as possible as I can. And again, they don't have to be these big grandiose gestures. I mean, simply making eye contact with another human being, smiling and saying good morning, literally takes no effort, takes less than 2 seconds, and that's just a very tiny emotional deposit that you could make in someone. And then, the ripple effect of that, if I see you and I smile and say good morning, 10 steps later, that might encourage you to smile and say good morning to someone else that you now see. And that takes me to another mantra that I live by, which is, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. See, what I want to
Ooh, I
make
like that.
folks know is, when I'm making these emotional deposits, it's actually giving me energy. It's not draining my energy. It makes me feel good to know that I've poured into another human being. And if I have a candle and I light your candle, mine doesn't shine any dimmer, or mine doesn't extinguish. Now we have two candles and the room's just a little bit brighter. And now if you and I each go light another candle, well, now four candles are lit in the same room and our candles are still burning. So to me, that mindset of, if I have something nice to say, if I learn something of value, I mean, 95% of everything I choose to put on social media, I put stuff out that I'm hoping someone finds useful or helpful. About 5%, I'll be a little self-indulgent and I might post something about my kids or post something that I'm doing. But the overwhelming majority of content that I choose to put out in social media, I'm hoping adds value to someone. I certainly know it's not adding value to everyone, and nor am I trying to do that. But if someone reads a post that I make and learns something, or it inspires them or makes them feel good, then that's a good thing. So to me, that's my goal. I want to light as many candles as I can. I want to delve out as many compliments and kind words as I can, and I want to leave every place better than I found it.
Alan, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier with the idea of you doing things for yourself and not really caring about what the outside perspectives think. Because I remember around high school, I started doing the same thing where I would just compliment people just because, first of all, I want to get better at speaking with people, but also I'm like, you know what? It'd be cool if people complimented me. So I'm sure people feel the same way, right? Maybe like, oh, I like your shoes, I like your shirt, whatever. And the biggest thing that I noticed, I never had a problem with, but I heard people bring up to me is the idea that, okay, I'm complimenting someone, but nobody's going to know about it, right? Like people want to do something so that, oh, there's a stadium and everybody sees you doing it. And right, like clap for Alan. He complimented this guy on the elevator. But one of the biggest things, which is interesting to me, is that people want to be reinforced for that instead of just wanting to do it out of the niceness of their heart. And this goes to so many things that you're talking about in the book with the idea of like, it's a battle, it's a journey with yourself as opposed to the people outside.
That's so insightful, and you are correct. And I have mixed feelings about that. So, perfect example. When I'm just going on my morning walk and I'm just picking up trash, no one sees that, no one knows. But obviously, I just made a point to say it on your podcast, and
That's
there's a
yeah,
nice
yeah.
reason for that. No, and to be honest, I'm being completely sincere. I'm not saying it because I want you to compliment me for doing that, or I want one of your viewers or listeners to leave a comment. I'm going to do that regardless. But here's the reason that I do think it's important to share that, because now that I said that, you might have a listener or a viewer who then says, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. I usually just walk by trash, but now I'm going to actually pick it up. So I think the ability to share some of these things that we're doing can help make that spread. And you see this stuff on social media all the time. I mean, it's kind of funny because I think we've all become so anesthetized to it that we forget. Like I was watching something the other day. There was a Facebook, there was a video, and it was this scenario where there was she looked like a nurse. She was wearing scrubs, and she was standing by her car at the gas tank, and she was going through her pocketbook, and from what the video, it looked like she was trying to scrounge together some money to be able to fill her gas tank. And while she was scrounging through, somebody came up behind her and put the gas in her car and used their credit card and started filling her car up with gas, and she didn't even know it. She's still looking through her purse. And then they take the gas pump out, they drive away, and she goes to grab the gas pump and realizes that somebody had already filled it up. Like, I think we could agree that would be a really cool gesture and a nice thing to do. And as I'm watching that, the only thing I could think of is, why was someone videotaping that?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
who really is going to just be sitting at a gas station and start filming someone that's rifling through their purse and catch that entire thing
yeah,
perfectly framed, by the way? And then I realized, yeah, of course that wasn't happenstance. That whole thing was set up. And but that doesn't mean that that's still not a good gesture. And it
right,
doesn't mean that them posting that they did anything wrong. If anything, they actually planted in me the idea that, hey, maybe that's something I could do in the future. I remember I was listening to a podcast one time, and I don't remember who said this, or I'd give them credit, but they said something to the effect of, and this was someone that financially was doing pretty well in life. And they said every time this person and his family would go out to dinner, they would kind of look around the restaurant and they would pick someone at the restaurant and they would just pay for their bill and not tell the person who it was. And maybe it was another family, or maybe it was somebody on a first date, or maybe it was someone that just looked like they could use a hand for whatever reason. And they would pay their own bill and then say, yes, I'm going to take care of that bill for that table over there. Don't tell them who did it. And they made it a point to do that every single time. And I thought that was super cool. And but I would never know that they did that if they didn't share it on the podcast.
right,
I'm
right.
actually grateful that they shared it. And I know that the person didn't share it to try and get some type of award or to try to get praise. So part of it is we should be doing good things for just doing good things. Like we don't need anyone to give us credit or give us praise. We don't even need anyone to acknowledge or to see it. We should do right because it's the right thing to do. But at the same time, I think it's important to be able to share these things that we do in hopes that other people will follow along and maybe try to emulate them.
Yeah, and I also think you can tell the kind of person that somebody like that is. Like, for example, the person that shared with you on your podcast that they pay for somebody else's dinner, they might have shared like a certain example, but if they share it one time, you can almost, depending on the person, assume that they've probably done it so many times they haven't shared it. In the same way that you were saying you pick up the trash and you're on your walk, you might share it one time, but you go on a walk every single day. So how many pieces of trash you pick up, you know? Um, one,
Absolutely. And one thing that I think is so important is this concept of giving without expectation. I mean, that's the truest form of selflessness, on some level. And I know I've been guilty of this for a good portion of my life. Lots of times we do nice things for others because we want them to do something nice for us. That I compliment you on the shirt you're wearing because I want you to then turn around and compliment me.
mm,
And if you have that expectation, it kind of erodes the sincerity and genuineness of why we're doing it. And I know, in previous times in my life, mostly based out of insecurity, I was guilty of that. Like I would do plenty of nice things, but it was always so someone would do something nice for me, or that they would owe me, or that, and that just defeats the whole purpose. So now, yeah, my goal is to give freely with no expectation. And whether giving means I'm picking up a piece of trash, I'm paying for someone's dinner that doesn't know it, or putting out social content, I'm not doing it for someone to give me a pat on the head. I'm doing it because that's the code that I want to live my life by, because it makes me feel good. And I have no expectation that anyone will acknowledge or praise or even care that I'm doing it.
yeah. My last question to you, Alan, is for somebody who's listening to this who might be younger, around my age, like 21 years old, and ambitious, what would be the one next play that you'd recommend for them?
Man, to be 21 again. I'm a little bit jealous in the best of ways. Um, I mean, from a next play standpoint, well, let me back up for just a moment. Just to give a little extra context for anyone watching or listening, Next Play really has three different lenses at which we can use it. We can use it in the micro, in the day to day, in the, something slightly doesn't go your way during the day. It's a traffic jam, or the internet cuts out, or the barista messes up your order at Starbucks. Are you able to quickly refocus your lens on the next play? Like, just let that bounce off of you. There are so many trivial inconveniences and annoyances that happen to us every single day as human beings. And can you have a next play mentality so those things don't erode your mindset and your attitude and your perspective? So that's one way to use it. The next way to use it is to zoom out and to use next play from a macro standpoint, which is taking a look at some of the most common life transitions that you'll most likely go through in the next few years? And how can you start to prepare for what your next play will be when your circumstances change? So for me, right now at 50 years old, I have two that are very distinct. On one hand, I've got, as I mentioned, three teenage children, which in the blink of an eye are going to graduate high school and go on to doing whatever they choose to do when they're technically adults. So I'm going to having been identified as a father with three kids at home to then my kids going out and I'll be what's known as an empty nester. That will be a completely different set of circumstances for me. So I'm already giving thought to what is my next
Mm,
play going to be in life when my kids graduate, and how can I step into that in the best way possible. On the other end of that spectrum, unfortunately, my mom passed away last November from dementia. And while my dad is still with us, he's not in the best of health. So I don't know how many more years I still have with him. But once again, I've spent 50 years on this planet having two parents, at least in the physical form. And now I've got one, and who knows, 5, 10, 15 years later, I might not have any. And same thing. That's a foreseeable next play. And how am I going to step into that next play when those circumstances change? So the third way we use next play is with goal setting. And goals by design are binary. Either you hit them or you don't. But the question should be the same no matter what. And that is, what is my next play? So maybe you set a very ambitious goal for your podcast and you hit it. That's awesome. You should celebrate and be proud. But then what's your next play after that? Or maybe you
yeah.
fall a little bit short and you say, all right, well, what's my next play now? How am I going to recalibrate? So with that being said, my advice to someone that's 21 years old is to use next play distinctly through those three different lenses. Number
Ooh,
one, be
yeah.
someone that is so bulletproof that no matter what happens throughout your day, it just bounces off of you and you're fine. Number two, ask yourself, as a 21-year-old, what are most likely going to be some of the circumstance changes, or what are some next plays that will probably come up in the next 3 to 5 years? And how can I best be prepared for those? And then the third way is, as a 21-year-old, I'm setting all sorts of goals in my life. I've got fitness goals and finance goals and relationship goals. And then just be able to recalibrate each of those goals, whether you hit them or you fall short, what's your next play? So at 21, I would recommend that you use next play in all three of those capacities.
Amazing answer. Alan, where can people find you at? Any links, any website shout outs?
Sure, man. They can just go to alansteinjr.com. That's kind of the hub for everything. I'm also at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram and X and LinkedIn. Very responsive and accessible via DM. So if someone enjoyed our conversation here, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm good about getting back. And if anyone's interested in any of my three books, Raise Your Game, Sustain Your Game, or Next Play, you can get those on Amazon or Audible or wherever you like to get your books or audiobooks.
And to all my listeners, thank you for listening all the way through, and I'll see you next Tuesday.